I was about 13 years old on my way to school one day in Athens, Greece, the place where I was born, and a biplane of the Greek Air Force flew overhead and began to do the most astonishing acrobatics. And it was so beautiful, so wonderful, that I got not only fascinated, but beyond that. And as the airplane finished doing the acrobatics over this area, and I began to walk on my way to school, I said to myself right then, that's it. When I grow up, I'm going to become a military aviator and nothing else. From then on, books and school meant nothing to me. All I wanted was to really look at the airplanes. And I began to skip school and walk some 25 kilometers to the aerodrome to watch the airplanes fly. I was dreaming, of course, when I got to age, to try to get into the Greek Air Force Academy. So just before I reached my 18th birthday, I investigated to find out what the exams would be all about, and I found out that I wasn't even qualified to be outside the building. Why? Because I was a third-class student. I knew nothing about history or math or things like that. Then when I discovered that I was not going to be able to make the Greek Air Force Academy, I said to myself, I'm going to leave Greece and go to America to learn to fly. I had just passed my 18th birthday. I joined the Greek Merchant Marine. A month later, after that, I had a job on a 10,000-ton freighter as an assistant fireman. And on the 25th of March, 1938, that vessel left Greece for destination unknown. The only thing we knew that was we were going to Oran, Algeria, in the Mediterranean to pick up a load of iron ore for either Cardiff or Baltimore. These two names, didn't mean a thing to me. What I knew about America was Chicago with the gangsters, New York, and Hollywood, where the movies are made. So we left Oran after the load, and one of the firemen who I was helping, I asked him, I said, where is this Cardiff or Baltimore? Well, he said, Cardiff is in England, and another vessel is going to take a load for Cardiff, but we're going to Baltimore. And I said, where is Baltimore? Oh, it's in America. He said, not too far away from New York. When I heard that not too far away from New York, I became so excited. Of course, I didn't really show my excitement. We were crossing the Atlantic Ocean. We ran into a storm. And I began to ask this fellow here, the fireman, tell me, do you know anything about Baltimore, this Baltimore you're talking about? Oh, he said, I was with another freighter many years ago, and one of the crew members, after we landed in Baltimore, one of the crew members wanted to visit New York to see his uncle. Oh, so we took the train from Baltimore and went to New York. But I said, how did you do that? You don't speak English. You don't need to speak English. The only thing you need to know is ticket for New York. I said, what do you mean, ticket for New York? Well, he said, that's when you go to the counter at the station and you buy your ticket and you board the train and you go to New York. Thank you very much. I didn't show any excitement. But it's funny, here I am in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, going through a doggone storm, and I'm shoveling coal and say to myself, ticket for New York, ticket for New York. Try to memorize those words. It took me all day to walk through the city of Baltimore and locate the railway tracks so I can find my way to the station. I made it. It was about 3 o'clock. When I got to the counter, I followed some people. After I asked a man in uniform, I said to the guy, ticket for New York. And he pointed, the little window. So I went to that little window and I threw my $7. I had $7 left now. I threw my $7 and I told the man like I knew exactly what I was saying. Ticket for New York. He got me the ticket. He took $3, I think, and gave me some change and pushed the other money to me. I arrived in New York in darkness. I came out on 34th Street and 8th Avenue. I didn't know where to go or what to do. I spotted the Greek and the American flag cross the avenue. I couldn't figure out what the Greek flag was doing in this country. So I dashed across and I almost got hit by a car. And found out that it was a small movie house playing the first movie ever made in Greece. And a movie that I had seen in Athens. All of us had seen it. The Shepherd's Daughter, Voskopula in Greek. I looked at the thing and I admired those black and white pictures that they had the old days. And all of a sudden, a miracle. And you think that movie with Edmund Gwynn, Miracle on 34th Street, took place on 34th Street? The miracle took place on 8th Avenue with me. Two Greek fellows just stopped behind me, about maybe 2 feet away from me, and they began to talk in Greek. One was saying, now what do the Greeks know about making movies? And the other fellow said, now look, let's go inside and have a look at it. And if we don't like it, we just, come out and go home. It was then when I intervened and joined the conversation. And I said to the elder fellow, I said, what is it you want to know about this movie? Well, he said, when it came here, so I saw this movie in Athens. In Athens, he said, and what are you doing here? The way you're dressed up looked like you came out from a goddamn ship. I said, I did. I told him what I had done, and I told him that I didn't want to go back to the ship. I wanted to stay in this country, and I want to become an aviator. And my God, he said, I told him, I was hoping to find a Greek church, No, he said, the Greek church can't help you. He said, we are brothers. He said, this is my young brother, and we live in Brooklyn. And he said, you come with us. And that was the miracle that really helped me, when I arrived here in the country. Christos, he was, by the way, a chef at a restaurant in Brooklyn, but he got me a job in a bakery on 147th Street and Broadway. I would say about 4 months later or 5 months later, I discovered a flying school at Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn, New York. They would teach you how to fly, and you do not have to really attend there on daily classes. You flew at your leisure time, and it was perfect for me. I devoted quite a bit of time there, and I began to fly the J-3 Cub, a little baby aircraft that travels some 65 miles an hour. I was on my day off, on my way to do some flying. And I was so mad because the day before, I had seen in the paper where the Germans were killing the Greeks all over Athens and stealing olive oil to take it back to Germany, and mix it with some chemicals to produce lubricants for the aircraft. And I was really furious. And I got to the airport there, and my instructor, Johnny Hilton, he said, Steve, he said, what's wrong with you? Said, something is wrong. And I told him, what I said in the paper, and I said, if I could only, get there, I said, I want to fight the Germans, and you really want to fight the Germans? I said, yes, Johnny, I'll give anything. He said, how would you like to join the Royal Air Force? I said, what? I can't go to England to join. No. He said, right here. The Royal Air Force is recruiting American civilian pilots. But Johnny, I said, I'm not an American. I told him that I had tried to join the Army and at the recruiting office in New York, and the guy, threw me out the office. Oh, he says, you're a Greek subject, he said, and the RAF, Greece is fighting with the RAF, and they take you. I was sent to Polaris Flight Academy in Glendale, California, where I was trained the military way to fly the aircraft. Polaris Flight Academy was on one of the 3 or 4 schools the RAF had recruited, or rather contracted, to train civilian pilots for the Royal Air Force. I spent about 3 months there, receiving about 90 hours in military aircraft. All the aircraft we had there were marked. They had the markings of U.S. Army Air Force aircraft. And upon graduation, I was in a class of 15 of us. 7 of us were appointed as sergeant pilots, and the other 8 as pilot officers, equivalent to a second lieutenant. I was one of the appointed pilot officers. In February 42, we left the U.S. through Canada, and we went to England. In England, I was sent to a pilot officers school to learn about officers, and above all, to learn how to salute, really. And after that, I was sent to an operational training unit to learn how to fight in air, combat flying, that is. We had Hurricanes and P-51 Mustangs, with the early Mustang with the Allison engine. And upon graduation from that school, I was sent to a fighter squadron, 268 Fighter Squadron at Newmarket, close to Cambridge. I began to fly in combat missions over Holland. And primarily what we were doing, strafing locomotives, trains, and anything that appeared to be military. And there, at the squadron, I had another problem. The Greek Air Force in exile, stationed in England, was trying to recruit pilots for a Spitfire squadron in Egypt. And one day I got a telephone call from this wing commander, Kinatos, who asked me to visit him in London at the Claridge Hotel. I visited the hotel, and he revealed to me that they were trying to locate escaped Greek pilots. Some of them had gone to Egypt, some of them to Cyprus, Malta, and some of them in England. And they had no way of trying to contact them, and of course, who had escaped. So what they did, they went to the Air Ministry and asked the officials there to look at the roster of active RAF pilots. And it was then how they intercepted my name. I told the wing commander that, I said, I don't want to go to Egypt. I want to stay in England and fight the Germans from here. But he says, you can't do that. You're a Greek subject. And, your duty is, I said, no, sir. I said, I left Greece, and my intention is when the war is over and I can make it, if I make it, survive, that is, I'd like to go back to America to become an American. No, he says, and I remember he said, I don't know what the king will say about this. King George II was also living at the same hotel, and evidently he was behind this recruitment. So, not knowing what to do, I sought the help of squadron leader Chesley Peterson, the commander of the 71 Eagle Squadron. And I called Pete, and we met in London, and I told him exactly what the Greek Air Force in exile was trying to do to me. And Pete said, do you want to go to Egypt? I said, no, sir, I want to stay here. Okay. He said, I'm going to Fighter Command, and I'm going to try to talk to them to see if I can get you out of 268 Squadron into my squadron, which he did. It's amazing. It's been 4 years since I came to America, and here I am now, flying with the Royal Air Force, one of the greatest air forces in the world, against Germany. But then we had a problem, because when Uncle Sam came over to England with the 8th Air Force, their aim was to recruit or to take every American who was flying in the Royal Air Force, especially the 3 Eagle squadrons, the 71, 121, and 133. And the reason was that the generals, particularly General Spaatz, he was looking at it, and he saw that there were 245 Americans with a PhD in aerial combat. And that would have been really a tremendous gift, to go to Uncle Sam. So anyway, preparations were made for the transfer, and I told Chesley Peterson, who was now in charge of the transfer of the 3 Eagle squadrons into the Army Air Force, I told him that, sir, I said, this is not for me, because I'm not an American. He said, they need you too. General Spaatz told me that they want every one of us, and you're included. So here I am. I was transferred into the Army Air Force at the end of September, beginning of October 1942, without being an American. On the 3rd of May, 1943, I was on a training flight with with my roommate, Don Gentili. And I was called to immediately pancake. Pancake in the RAF terminology and also in the Army Air Force then means land. Just come back and land, pancake. So they called me and they told me that I was to pancake immediately. So I left my training site there and I returned to the base and I landed. And as I parked my P-47, I saw Lieutenant Colonel Peterson with my squadron commander, Tommy Andrews, in his staff car. After I jumped down from the aircraft, I went over and I saluted and I said to Colonel Peterson, I said, why did they call me for my training flight? He said, get in the car. We got on the car and he began to drive to his office. And he asked me what I thought about the Thunderbolt. And in my mind, immediately I went back and thought of the Greek authorities. I said to myself, they have gone to the Americans and told the Americans that this guy is a Greek subject, not an American, and that he belongs to the Greek Air Force. Oh my God, we got to his office and he asked me to sit down opposite his office. He got on the phone and he said, this is Colonel Peterson, connect me with the embassy. Oh my God, I said, evidently he has no guts to tell me about it. And he wants someone from the embassy to tell me that I cannot stay in the American Air Force. So I said, I began to really, not cry, but I felt really kind of down. And here is old Colonel Peterson telling the ambassador when he answered the phone, John, Pitt here. I got the lieutenant right here, and I think you better tell him. Oh, my God, I said to myself, they're going to tell me that I cannot stay in the American Air Force. He gave me the phone, and as I tried to put the phone, close to my face there, I said, yeah, yes, sir, this is Lieutenant Pisanos. He said, young man, how would you like to become an American citizen here in London today? I think I stopped breathing. And I said, but I said, I was hoping when I returned to America. No. He says, we're going to naturalize you as an American here in London. And you better just get down here as soon as possible. And in the meantime, I looked at my squadron commander there, Chesley Peterson. He was laughing while he was trying to light his pipe. The ceremony was going to take place that afternoon, and it was a wonderful ceremony. More generals, more war correspondents. Walter Cronkite was there, Ed Morrow was there, and God knows who else. And after the ceremony, I remember the man from the immigration told the audience, may I present to you Lieutenant Steve Pisanos, the first individual ever to become an American citizen for the first time in American history outside the continental limits of the U.S. You have no idea how proud I was. I think I was crying all over the place. So we began to fly now with the P-47. We were ready, combat ready, and we began to escort the bombers further and further into Germany. I had my first victory on the 21st of May, 1943. I sat down an FW-190 over Belgium. My group commander, a fellow by the name Don Blexley, Colonel Don Blexley, who passed away last year, he wanted to have an aircraft to to really go to Berlin, as far as Berlin, escorting the bombers. And that aircraft turned out to be the P-51 Mustang. And I took part in escorting missions, 800 bombers, 500 fighters, 1,000 bombers, 600 fighters. And I took part on the first Berlin escort mission on the 3rd of March 1944. Then on the 5th of March 1944, we had an escort mission down to Bordeaux, France, on the southern part of France. We were to take a bunch, two groups of B-24s, while they were to bomb 2 air bases the Luftwaffe was using, with Ju-88s flying over the Atlantic and bombing convoys. And I guess the bomber boys want to destroy these 2 bases. Anyway, over Bordeaux, we got mixed up with a bunch of FW-190s and Me-109s. I got a credit for 4 destroyed that day. But on the way back, I was flying alone, and I was coming up at about 22,000 feet, and I knew that the way my engine was operating, I wasn't going to make it down to the English Channel and bail out over the channel and be picked up by the RAF later on. And just before I came up over Le Havre, my engine just gave up. I didn't want to bail out high because of the fear the Germans might shoot at me. So what I did, after I had released the canopy and unbuckled myself there, I tried to stand up. There is a cord that is connected to the dinghy you are sitting on it. You connect that cord to your May West. The cord, I tried to pull it left and right, nothing. I said, sit down again. Panicking, of course, you know. So I sat down back in the cockpit, and I played the cord back and forth, here, there, you know. Finally, it got unplugged there. And I connected it to the May West, you know. There was no need now because I was over land. I wasn't going to use my dinghy. And then I stood up again, and I got out on the left wing. And it was then when I looked ahead, and I can see cows, you know, all over the countryside. And I was about maybe 300-400 feet above the ground. I knew that I could really bail out and have a parachute open. I thought for a moment, I thought of trying to get back in the cockpit, but I was fearful that with my parachute all over me, I would disturb the stick and possibly, you know, kill myself. So I stood right there holding at the left longeron there. And then funny, the aircraft was coming over the top of a barn. And it was then when I just reached inside with my right hand and pulled the stick back, barely missing the barn. And as I came over the other side, the right wing, dropped to the right, and I was thrown on the left. When I came to it and I decided to put fire on the aircraft, 2 German soldiers, evidently they had spotted the aircraft coming down. They came after me and they began to fire their automatic weapons. Trembling, and I was ready to light a match that I had taken from my escape kit and mix my scarf that I had dipped into the tank with the parachute from my parachute. The 2 German soldiers began to fire, you know, and I thought they were trying to scare me, more or less, visualizing that maybe I would damage the aircraft. It was when the bullets hit the vertical stabilizer of my aircraft that then I said, they need to kill me. I dropped everything and I ran into the forest. They came in the forest, and I think that's what I lost them. And funny, when I came out of the forest and I spotted my crashed aircraft, not burning, it was not really burned, thank God. And I spotted my aircraft there. I jumped a barbed wire and I came out to a paved road. And I began to walk down that paved road, and I came out a bend there, the motorcycle. There was a motorcycle. The 2 gentlemen had arrived on the scene. Anyway, scared that maybe other Germans will come in, I jumped another barbed wire and I went the opposite direction. For 5 days, I wandered all over the countryside with an injured shoulder. I finally made contact with the underground. They picked me up. They brought me to a point, and I had a problem with them. I still had to convince them so they can check with London who exactly I was, because they had a problem. The underground in France at the time had a problem. Before the war, there was a group of American German families with children, grown-up children, who went to Germany to visit relatives. The war started and they were trapped there. What did the Gestapo do? Picked up those young fellows, young 18, 20-year-old guys, and recruit them as Gestapo agents. I was told a story how a B-17 with American markings was flying one day, and there were parachutes coming out of the B-17, imitating that the aircraft were damaged. Those guys in the parachutes were not Americans, they were German agents. And he told me one story how they intercepted this guy, and he had not given them the proper information. For example, when they asked me my name, my rank, my serial number, that was not enough. Because the Germans with the dog tags, they can really imitate an individual. They wanted to know my father's name, where I was born, where I went to school. Over and above that, there's 3 items there. They want to know my squadron commander's name. So it was then, when I gave them all this information they wanted, and they went to London and found out who I was. And I'll never forget the day he came into my room with a bottle of Bordeaux wine. So, Stefan, he said, you're the Flying Greek. I never told him anything about the Flying Greek, but in the RAF, in the Army Air Force, I was known as the Greek. The Greek. In combat, instead using my call sign, Greek, let's go get this guy. Greek, turn around. Greek, come over, this and that. After I spent about 10 days with this individual, it was decided that I was going to Paris. They moved me to Paris on a truck loaded with firewood. The driver, we were up in the front cabin, the driver here, me in the middle, and another Frenchman here who spoke good French, good English, and he was a gendarme, a policeman for the countryside, but in civilian clothes, of course. And we conversed everything. So on the way to Paris, we were stopped by 2 German soldiers. One of them around a bend. We went through a small town. The truck was proceeding very slowly. So this German soldier pulled the Luger and he came up and pointed at the driver to stop. They want to bump a ride to Paris. Not that they want, but when I saw them, my heart, just went up. So anyway, with the 2 German soldiers now sitting at the top of the firewood, my friend here revealed to me, he said, underneath the firewood, beaucoup mitraillettes, many machine guns and other weapons, hand grenades, the RAF had dropped during the night for the resistance in Paris. Now, how do you get those things in the front of the Germans? The truck was just the perfect alibi. Because on the way to Paris, we passed by German patrol vehicles, German staff cars, and, the fear was still with me, that we'll be stopped and say, who is this young fellow that you're transferring? But we had good insurance with the 2 soldiers, at the top of the fire truck. Anyway, in Paris, I spent about 6 months, and I lived with 16 different families. The last family, of course, was really wonderful. Those guys were the biggest saboteurs I joined with, and we did some sabotaging. We ambushed a convoy one night with another group northeast of Paris, and they gave me an automatic Brent weapon there to use, and I must have really killed about 6 Germans that night. Paris was liberated, okay, and as I said, and several hundred, 700-800 of us came out from hiding. We were taken back to England. And upon reporting back to my station there, they were glad to see me, of course. And I was told that no more combat for me because I knew too much about the underground and operations in France. And they felt that if I had been shot down again, if I had gone down in France, the Gestapo had means, of really making me talk. Anyway, so then it was decided that I had to return back to the States, and that's when I was assigned to Wright Field. at Wright Field. I went through test pilot school. We had captured German aircraft there, the Messerschmitt 109, the FW-190, the Me-262, including the Japanese Zero. And I did quite a bit testing and open graduation from the test pilot school. My roommate from the war days, Don Giantelli, he and I were selected to do the service test of the YP-80 here at Newark, California. I was testing a P-63 one day, I remember, over Cincinnati, 35,000 feet, and I got into trouble. The engine exploded on me, and I had to dead stick the aircraft with the gear down at the right field. I locked both wheels. I landed halfway down the runway, and I locked both wheels, and both wheels caught fire. And the fire trucks and the ambulance that were really following me, after I jumped the aircraft off the runway, jumped from the aircraft, as I rolled off the runway, the firemen there with the foam, covered my whole body, my eyes and everything. They took me to the hospital, and it was then when a pilot from the bomber section, a TWA guy on military leave, was trying to recruit pilots from Wright Field. He came over the hospital after all my friends had come over to see me what happened. Giantelli and Yeager and Dick Bong and Gabi Gabreski also too. They came over to see what had happened to me, and after they left, this TWA guy came in and he said, "Hey buddy, I have a B-26 and I'm going to Kansas City. That's the headquarters for TWA. And I need a co-pilot." He said, "How about it?" I said, "Jimmy, I'll come with you." I felt that, I survived the war. Maybe it's the time for me to get out like so many of us were leaving the service. But then I got disappointed with TWA. I felt that the airline game was not really for me. And I wanted to get back on active duty, and I didn't have 2 years of college like the Air Force required then. And I was on a flight to LaGuardia through Washington, D.C., and my friend Giantelli was at the Pentagon. So he met me at National, and we had coffee together. I told him that I was unhappy about TWA and the airline game, and he said, "Would you like to get back on active duty?" I said, "But how can I do that? I have no 2-year college." "Yeah, but," he said, "you got something the Air Force will give anything to have you." I said, "What?" "Jet time." I had over 100 hours of jet test time. And at that time, the jet pilots in the Air Force can be counted on your hands, on your fingers. And so he said, "Look, when you get back to Kansas City, I'll send you an application for recall to active duty. Complete that, but don't send it through channels. You send it to me." I did that. 10 days later, I had orders from the Pentagon by direction of the president to report back on active duty. I went to the Pentagon. I spent about 4 years there. I got a regular commission. I got promoted to major. And from there, I had assignments with Germany and with NATO in Italy, and back to Colorado Springs with headquarters Air Defense Command and NORAD and Northern Air Force Base. Then back to Germany again in 1964. When my tour was over at 67, I volunteered from Germany to go to Vietnam. I thought I was going to have a divorce in my hands, because when I went home and I told my wife, she said, "Why did you do that?" I told her that I felt that America was in the vine, and being a man of the military, I should be there. So finally she saw my light. I spent a year in Vietnam supporting the Special Forces camps in the jungles of Vietnam with the Caribou, a 2-engine aircraft. I flew 375 missions in Vietnam. I was given command of my squadron, and after I left Vietnam to come home, I was notified that I had been promoted to colonel, full colonel, and that I was to proceed to Little Rock Air Force Base to be deputy commander for an ICBM wing. It was really unbelievable. I spent about 2.5 years there, learning. They sent me to school, of course, for 3 months. learning about the ICBM machines that carry the atomic bomb, aiming every one of those missiles that I was in charge, 18 silos, every one of those missiles was aiming at the Soviet Union. And of course, those buggers, had the same thing on us. But the bombs we had on those missiles were not the baby bombs we had dropped in Japan. They were the hydrogen bombs. One of those bombs in Moscow would have wiped the whole goddamn city. It was there at that assignment when a colonel from the Colonels and Generals Assignment Office at the Pentagon called me up and he said, Pisanos, how would you like to go to Athens, Greece and be the chief of the Air Force mission? I thought somebody was holding my leg, being promoted to colonel, and now I told the guy, I said, what are you trying to pull my leg or something? No, he said, I'm not pulling any legs. He said, he repeated his name, Colonel Tolman, and he was in charge. And he said, I told my personnel people to give me a colonel, a fighter pilot background, Vietnam background, who can speak Greek. And the only card that pops out on the IBM machine is Pisanos. So that's why he said we picked you up. Anyway, I left the Air Force, the ICBM wing, and we went to Athens, Greece on a diplomatic passport. What America did for me, I treasure deep in my heart. I never dared to dream that someday I would be wearing the uniforms of two great air forces, the British Royal Air Force and the Army Air Force, and later on the United States Air Force, where I attained the rank of a colonel. That I would complete 3 distinguished military schools, accumulating some 8,000 flying hours in some 85 different types of aircraft, prop-driven and jet-propelled aircraft, including a fighter, the F-106. Yes, I was able to really achieve and accomplish all this with the opportunity given to me by Uncle Sam and the American people. And my gratitude to this great country is too great to express in words how I feel in my heart.